Hi, everyone. My name is Linsey, and I'm currently a first-year PhD student at Harvard, and I did my master's just now in the University of Toronto.
So what is STEAM education? STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Design, and Math. Simply, STEAM education is a multidisciplinary approach to teaching. STEAM is designed to encourage discussions and problem solving among students, developing both practical skills and appreciation for collaboration.
So why STEAM? So we consider design to be exactly what is educational. So in order to build a diverse, technologically advanced, really representation matters in these creators. And also STEAM, our mission is to center around moving education and access. Our events have a monthly basis, and they are workshops to teach student tools, and also connect women and gender diverse parents and volunteer opportunities to connect with other local organizations focused on these issues.
Next slide. Here are some women in STEAM statistics. We all know that women and minorities are underrepresented in STEM fields. To put that into context, in the US, despite women making up nearly half the workforce at 48%, only 27 STEAM workers are women by 2019. We have made gains, however, as in 1970, only 8% of women worked in STEM-related fields. In Canada, there are even less women in STEM. According to Statistics Canada, 34% of Canadians with a STEM degree are women, and they make up only 23% of Canadians working in science and technology.
Now for some LGBTQ+ statistics. According to a study by Science.org that surveyed 25,000 people in the US, LGBTQ+ professionals were 20.2% more likely than the non-LGBTQ+ peers to agree that they had experienced professional evaluation, which is when their STEM expertise have been evaluated. When it comes to mental health, LGBTQ+ people were 27% more likely to experience minor health problems, at least some at the time in the past year. 41% were more likely to experience insomnia, and 22% were more likely to have problems with stress at work. 30% were more likely to have experienced one or more depressive symptoms in the past year. 1/3 of LGBTQ+ professionals experienced one or more symptoms.
Hi everyone, my name is Misha. I'm just a part of the UBC Pre-Med Society, and we were so excited that Steve reached out to us and wanted to be on with the event. But yeah, there's like a lot that goes to my hand, like, senior initiatives and obviously UBC Pre-Med. So we hope to see a lot of more female positions out there and stuff, and just a little bit about the club as well, when we offer opportunities for networking and stuff, like similar opportunities as Steve is offering. But yeah, if there's any questions and stuff, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, so our words for today are to 1, demystify the processes of getting into med school and biomed application, discuss biomed career options, and examine the challenges that underrepresented genders face. We'd also like to disclaim that all presented opinions are not affiliated to the institution and their still and their rights.
So for today's agenda, we have demystified med school, which is the application process and how to get into med school, MD careers, what is biomed academia, PhD careers, biomed E-tracks, challenges that underrepresented genders might encounter, and after the main presentation, we'll have a Q&A session.
Thank you guys. Okay. So show of hands, are you guys all in university? So who's in first year? Raise your hand. Who's in second year? Third year? Fourth year? Oh, okay. Wow. So yeah. I guess like when I was in undergrad, I went to UBC here. I did microbiology and immunology. I honestly did not know what being a physician really entailed. And it's only until third or fourth year of my medical training that I actually realized what it actually entails when on the wards, when you're talking to patients, when you're working with allied healthcare professionals. But I think it's for everyone who wants to apply to get in, just reading about Canada's framework is really important. So Canada's framework is just framework on how to think what a physician should be and all the competencies that you should have as a doctor. Even through medical school training, they keep on referring to it. When we graduate, we have to meet all the competencies. Number one is a medical expert. Obviously, you have to take patient histories, diagnose, formulate a management plan, plan procedures, therapies. As a communicator, you have to establish relationships with patients and the families. You have to document your plan. That's a lot of being a doctor is writing notes, documenting. As a collaborator, you're working with nurses, PT, OT, pharmacists, everyone on the board. As a leader, you're improving patient safety. You have to lead teams. As a senior resident, throughout your training, you'll have someone junior than you that they might follow you throughout the day. You have to explain all the things that you know to them, even though you might feel like you don't know anything. And as a health advocate, you have to constantly push for your patients. For example, to get testing done, to be seen by other doctors, you have to write referrals to other specialists to make sure that their health is and then you as a health advocate, as a scholar, you will have to continue to learn, and it's nice that it's lifelong learning. Like there's not one point in life that you'll stop learning. And some of the people might not realize this, like even 5-10 years down the road, you'll still have to constantly take exams every 5 years to prove that you're still up to date on knowledge. Do research maybe, and then as science is progressing, things are always changing, so you have to learn new medications and technologies. And as a professional, you also have to keep yourself to the highest ethical standards. And as a leader of the healthcare team, you will be legally responsible for other people that are reporting to you. So you're responsible for good and bad patient outcomes pretty much, and you're liable for the actions of others, which is a lot of responsibility. And then difficult scenarios that come up, which you are responsible as a doctor, include responsibility to report domestic abuse, child abuse, involuntarily leading someone to hospital for psychiatric illness, taking someone's driver's license away because they can't no longer drive, and breaking boundaries. And even as a working medical student, I've had to deal with all of that so far. And it's a lot to deal with at first, but eventually you get really good at it, and it's something that is. I would say no one else really deals with on a daily basis, and you learn very valuable skills. So again, like soft skills, I think are actually more important than hard skills. Soft skills mean like the ability to communicate your thoughts and empathize with people. Like the amount of times that I've gotten good feedback is when I made patients feel like they felt like I cared. So they actually wrote letters to my preceptors and told them how I made them feel safe and heard. And those are things that would make you more, I guess, stand out compared to your peers. Versus if you're just good at, you have a lot of knowledge, you can do all the procedural skills right, it might not stand out as much. Next slide, please. And that's just a brief overview of what the survey, what patients felt like consisted of a good doctor. Again, like a lot of it is expertise and your knowledge, but half of it is just listening to them and giving them space to feel heard. Next slide. So for general application process, I guess you guys are already in university. Minimum 3 years for UBC, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then medical school, at least in Canada, with the exception of Calgary. Calgary is 3 years. And every other medical school in Canada is 4 years. After 4 years, you will get an MD. But around this time of the year, like I'm going through right now, you have to apply for residency training, which means you'll, right now it's over Zoom, but usually you have to fly all over the country and interview your different schools for the specialties that you wanted. So right now I'm applying to family medicine positions across the country. And then you'll get interviewed, and then residency is 2 to 5 years on top of that. So for family medicine right now, it's 2 years, but for every other, most other specialties, it's 5 years. So just thinking about during residency, you are paid. There's like a standardized salary, differs by province, but it usually starts around 50,000 a year and goes up by 2,000 a year. So you can terms of like future planning, your ability to reach like the attending salary is still about 2 to 5 years even after we graduate medical school. Next slide. So for UBC specifically, so you know, has anyone actually looked at the application process online? Okay. So yes, overall academic, your academic score is 50%, and then your non-academic score is another 50%. So your academic score consists of pretty much your average of all the courses you've taken in your undergrad. That could be 3 or 4 years. I won't talk too much about like the adjusted average, which is when they drop like the lowest 30 credits. But your academic is relatively important. It consists of 50% of your application. The MCAT is the standardized testing that everyone will have to take in order to apply. It's a 7.5-hour exam, which tests your knowledge in physics, chem, biochem, etc. That just anecdotally I hear is not too important for pre-application. It's only really after you have the interview that we kind of factor it into more. And if you're non-academic, I argue is really the area to kind of show yourself, because that non-academic things are so subjective. Like how can you say one activity is better than the other, right? So unfortunately, because that is so subjective, I think ways to make yourself stand out, obviously, things that are long-term commitment, things that are, serve the community, have a purpose, and then really the way you describe it. You've all applied to university, so even you guys know how to word your applications. And then, unfortunately, we're not really able to see where we rank unless you are rejected from UBC. I think when you are rejected, you can see kind of roughly what percentile you rank. And then experiences are again like highly subjective. It really depends on who's reading your application at the time. So I recommend giving it to a lot of people to read over before you submit. And then you need 2 references. And then this is one academic. So that is from a professor, a research supervisor, and then 1 service or professional reference. These are from expert as well. And these hopefully are people who know you really, really well so that they can write valuable detail. And then for the interview, this is a 1.5 day on a weekend, and right now it's still resumed. I think the staff for this year was around 700 people out of the 2,000 or so were invited. And it's in the multiple community interview format. There's 10 different stations that judge your critical solving skills, your ethics, talk about your personality, empathy. There's a lot of like sample questions behind that you can do. When you even have a document of different stations that they could ask you, but it's just your ability to reason and talk and communicate. And some schools will do traditional panel interview, but we just do one-on-one or one-on-three. Afterwards, with questions like why do you want to do medicine, or why are you think you would be a good doctor, etc. But that's what UBC does. And currently this year, I think they are offering 306 seats at UBC, which is an increase from previous years. Next slide. I won't go too much into it. Like these stats are on the website. But at least for UBC, you need at least 90 credits, so around 3 years of undergrad to apply. You at least need 6 credits of English courses, and that's 2 courses. And then minimum 75% for BC applicants. And then NCAT 124 and above in all sections, which is, I don't think that's I forget what percentile it is, but it's not a high percentile to achieve. This is to make sure that you're not severely behind in a certain section. And then example of undergrad majors. Honestly, you can do anything you want. I have my classmates who are in engineering and arts, but you know, traditionally people do take more life science heavy majors. At UBC at least, for example, I did my biology and immunology, but you definitely don't have to. If you are interested in more, you know, anatomy-wise, I think that's a good major to have, just to get a really good understanding of physiology before going to school and not have that be your first time being exposed to everything. But you know, once you're in a school, they teach you everything you need to know, so everything evens out by year 3 or 4. And then next one. And then this is UofT medical stats. Again, 3 years undergrad, 2 full courses of science, 1 humanities courses, GPA 3.6, which is like 80 to 84%, NCAT 125 or above. Just to this thing, I feel like medical schools do prefer people who are in their province. For example, if you guys apply to UBC, you would have so much stronger application if you apply out of province. And they do have different standards for people who are in province versus out of province. Next slide. And then different types of experiences that UBC kind of looks for. We divided into different domains like leadership, service ethics, diversity of experiences, capacity to work with others. You have the typical leadership experiences, but you know, non-typical experiences that people have are like being a parent, taking care of their elderly grandma, overcoming health adversity, overcoming different adversity in their lives, unpaid work on a farm. So there's a lot of things you can write about, and there are a lot of spaces. So if you can, I would recommend that you try to fill out all of the spaces. And there's more than enough for you to describe your entire life in detail. So I guess my key point is that you know, your traditional extracurriculars are great. Just kind of think of things that you might have experienced in your life that you also learned something from that you can write about. And then next slide. Yeah, and then those are the 5 different categories that we have that you write your experiences under. I was going to say something about the area of type performance. Oh yeah, that one, I think they say that you want to write it if you achieve anything provincial level or above. So I don't write anything about it. And next slide. Yeah, so I think some worry about the UofT technology. I think as a physician and what I see day to day, a lot of that medicine is algorithmic, but honestly, the patients who come to the office not for some answers, they just want to talk to you and they just want to be reassured. So a lot of times you're just you're not just accounts, but you are just being emotional support for them. Every decision is so complex. You have to think about socioeconomic factors, their finances, where they live, how they access healthcare. And then as a doctor, you have to be able to deviate from standard protocol. You have to be able to creatively problem solve, and also you have to deal with ethical dilemmas. No current AI system can replicate making decisions, or cultural, medical, and ethical considerations are all important. And then next slide. Okay, yeah, next slide. So just in terms of like having an MD, again, there's lots of different specializations available. I guess when you're in medicine, you'll get to think about that a little bit more. Versus like medical versus surgical, do you want to work more with your hands or work more with your mind? Not to say that surgeons don't think, but it is more of an aspect and procedural. You again like need to apply for these programs at the end of fourth year, and it is stressful because you've done all of this, you've gone into medical school, you think you know what you want to do. And you're trying to do that, but not everyone might match to the program or the specialty that they want. So a lot of people like parallel plans. So they, for example, they plan on doing internal medicine. They also, back up with certain specialties. And this is to make sure, that you are able to do something even after your degree, and having a residency program is really important. In terms of like being able to actually practice medicine. But a lot of people do like take a gap year after they graduate, maybe they weren't able to match, and they take a year off, they do some research, and then they try again because they really know that this specialty is what they want to do in life. And just in terms of working, you can work in a hospital if you want. To work in an outpatient clinic, so we just on the streets, go see. I'm sure you guys have been to a doctor before. Work more hours or more your own versus in the hospital. Maybe they're determined by staffing and administration, or you can do a little bit of a mix of both. For example, as a family doctor, you can choose to either work in the hospital as a hospitalist, or do like admit patients, follow them overnight, work in your own clinic, have a 9-to-5 job, work 1 day a week if you want, or you can work surgical assisting, helping surgeons during surgery, and you do shift-based work and only pick up shifts whenever you like. And then if you don't want to do medicine at all, even after you graduate, you're like, you know what, I thought this wasn't for me, I don't want to talk to patients. There's a lot of consulting work that you can do as well, for healthcare organizations, pharmaceutical companies. There's also medical legal work as well. I work with a cardiologist that does a lot of this. So he basically, during trials, he goes up to the stand and he's an expert witness. And he basically tries to defend doctors who are being sued. And then health policy and advocacy, working with government agencies and nonprofits trying to improve healthcare systems. Okay, and next one. And then this is just some top 10 specialties of 2022. Family medicine is number 1, internal medicine, medicine geology. Just because they're more popular doesn't mean that they're more easier to get in, or just because something's not popular doesn't mean that it's easier to get in. Because some specialties may have lesser spots. For example, it can be as little as only like 1 or 2 spots in the entire province of BC. But as always, I'm sure you're going to need more family doctors, and there's always spots available for family medicine. Next slide. Okay, and lastly, just different challenges in med that maybe you guys hadn't current stage of training may not think of. The number one thing that prevents people from wanting to go in is pretty much the length of training. It is a really long time. You know, most people start medical school at age 24. 4 years or 2 to 5. People are on average like 30, 33 years when 30 to 33 years old when they graduate and able to practice independently. And then, you know, for a lot of people, these years are times when traditional milestones are you see your friends have already gone through, like, you know, marriage, you know, having a family, having good income, stable income, travel the world. You can do those things, but I think there are a lot of sacrifices that you definitely would have to make. And then concentrating in BC, it's $20,000 to $25,000 a year. You'll be able to get student loans easily and have line of credit that can cover that. So I wouldn't say finances is too big of a concern, but most people do graduate with debt. Depending on family support, but if you don't have any family support, it can be at least, you know, $80,000 to $100,000. And then paperwork is a lot of doctors' annoyance, I'd say. Documentation is really everything, especially if you don't want to sue. Every time you have to talk to the patient, every time you talk to their family, you have to document it. So starting off, I felt like paperwork was more than like 50% of the day for me. Definitely to get shorter as you progress, and you know, you find things like templates, and you find things to make your workflow more efficient. But it is really hard and draining. And lastly is medical culture. This is kind of like a thing for learning medicine. And I feel like people are going into these environments where you're expected to work as much as possible. You know, even past your scheduled shifts. So sometimes you may be on call for 24 hours. You know, after the 24 hours, you want to go home. You know, it's like 10 a.m. the next day, but then everyone else is staying, so you're kind of expected to stay even longer. And then there's a fear of repercussions when you know you have people that are senior to you, expecting certain things from you, and not. I guess it's more of a culture feeling that you can't really take a sick day even when you're sick. But things are changing. Like schools are trying to acknowledge this and giving people personal days. But I think medical culture, there's still a lot of systemic issues that needs to be changed. And this is where you guys kind of come in, is the new generation who acknowledges things like burnout, mental health, going in with these perspectives. Next slide. That is it for me. I'll pass it to you, Linsey.
Okay, thank you, Alice. That was an awesome overview of the medical profession and also medical school. So I just wanted to say how lovely it is to see everyone who's there in person. Unfortunately, I'm joining via Zoom. I'm currently in Toronto, but this room is so beautiful. It makes me wish I went to UBC. So for everyone who's thinking, you know, maybe human biology is really cool, but the medical practice is not really for them, I'd love to introduce you to the field of research in academia. Next slide, please. So to start off, I'll just be going over what exactly a researcher does. So I'm sure you've all done research projects for class, but what exactly does being a full-time researcher mean? So in general, research just means that you're working on solving problems in your particular field of interest that have no concrete answers. And in doing so, you're using your creativity and analytical skills to advance the field through like an informed stepwise series of trials and errors, essentially. And one of the most satisfying things about research is being able to have an idea that few others in the world are working on and to take it all the way and see it come to fruition. And in the field of biomedical research, some of the questions that we might ask will actually come directly from the medical practice. So everything we know now that's taken as fact comes from some scientists back in the day doing an experiment. And as a doctor, there are many times where you might find yourself unable to do anything for someone's disease, or cases where you just don't know what's wrong with the patient. And when this happens, they can choose to turn to researchers. And researchers can attempt to investigate these novel questions in one of two ways, or often complementary ways. So we can either do this experimentally. So think a typical person with a white lab coat in a bench, pipetting. So most of your like high school or university lab experiments, and we call this wet lab, or computationally, which means writing code to simulate large data sets, analyzing large quantities of data using high performance computing, which we call dry lab. So in either one of these, research follows the typical framework, which we term the cycle of research. So to do so, you first have to ask a question and make sure it's a good question. And then you come up with a hypothesis and design an experiment to test that hypothesis. And then you can gather data, you run your experiments, and you analyze the data, interpret the data, and then often go back to your hypothesis. And many rounds of this later, you can hope to write and publish your results in a paper to share with the larger community. And on a day-to-day basis, this basically means reading lots of papers, talking to your colleagues about your ideas, presenting your experiments to your peers and professors, and running your experiments, which is often like a multi-day process and often running many things at once. So for a wet lab scientist, it's kind of like cooking a giant feast that involves multiple dishes at the Michelin star level, where you're being very specific and very particular about what goes into a dish, and a lot of precision is involved. You're testing your recipe to see if the customers like it, and if that matches your hypothesis of what's going to sell well. And for a dry lab scientist, it's really just a lot of looking at large amounts of data, cleaning the data, plotting the data, or you might be interested in developing cool new algorithms, doing statistics, or doing machine learning. So in terms of the time commitment, it's very flexible. So that's one of the major pluses of being in grad school. So if you're a 9 to 5 person, that can be your schedule. Or if you're like me and you like to wake up at 1 p.m. and work until 1 a.m., you can also do that. But depending on the day, this might also change. So there are some experiments you can't really pause for. So some of your days might be very long and some of your days will be short. But I think it's very satisfying that that's in your control and you get to plan that around your own schedule. And in grad school, there are no tests, essentially. There are only presentations and very minimal course requirements, and your grades don't really matter that much. And the major benefit is you actually get paid. So graduate schools in Canada for research-based master's or PhD, you will get paid. It is a pretty good salary. You can definitely live on the salary. So yeah, that is one major benefit. Next slide. So if that sounds interesting, then you might be wondering if research is for you. So I think some good traits of researchers include just a general curiosity or passion for science. So if you find yourself asking questions in class of like, what's beyond the course material, or thinking of new ways to do something, and if you're self-motivated and work well on your own timeline, or if you just love learning new things and taking things from different fields and synthesizing them, or if you're just curious about research, you should just go ahead and do it. It's really great, and scientists are very cool and very fun, and you get to meet lots of new people in a research lab that are coming essentially from all walks of life and working towards the same goal. And they all have different backgrounds and are different ages, and it's genuinely a really great environment to learn and to grow. So one of the big things about like being in research is that people might think that you need to be like really great at science, but you don't even need to be good at science. You just have to be curious and be hardworking. So there are many scientists around me that have told me that they've failed high school or undergraduate science classes, and I think that's everyone's brains work differently, and being in class versus being in an actual research position is very different. So in class you might be doing a lot of memorization or just learning how to take a test well. But in the research lab, you're really just being brave enough to test your hypothesis and just reading a lot and being brave enough to try things out. Next slide. So how do you start in a research lab? So first of all, I just like to say that it's never too early or too late to start. So starting early is the best because then you have time to be exposed to many different things. Just because one area of research does not interest you, or you're not particularly good at one subject, doesn't mean that you suck at all science or hate all research. So if you can think of a field, there's research for it. There's biomedical research, there's evolutionary research, there's ecology research, there's even math research. And within biomedical research, you can have cancer research, genetics, drug discovery, viruses, bacteria, fungi, synthetic biology, or even biostatistics. And being in Vancouver, it's a great place to start in research. So both UBC and SFU have really strong research labs. So you guys might know Dr. Peter Alice at UBC did some of the research that was very fundamental to actually the generation of the COVID mRNA vaccines. So his lab researches lipid nanoparticles, which are the things that actually hold the mRNA in these vaccines. So the first step to get involved is to find a research lab, which you can typically find in the research tab of most university websites. So UBC definitely has this, and we can distribute the slides after, and I can link this, or you can just look for it yourself. I'm sure you're totally capable. And then from there, you want to kind of find an institute or topic that interests you. And then you can click through the list of professors and their lab websites and see what catches your eye and make a note. So you want to come up with a list of approximately 5 to 10 professors, and then send them an example email such as this one. So this one I've just written for maybe like of somebody coming straight out of high school. So I think you guys are all, well in undergrad. So you might want to mention different things, but essentially you want to mention, what your background is, what you're interested in, and be very specific about the thing that actually caught your eye. So experience is good, but not at all necessary. You just have to express that you have enthusiasm and interest for the topic and that you're hardworking and willing to learn. So a mistake that you do not want to make is you do not want to self-eliminate yourself. I've heard of many people who have had no research experience and they just cold emailed somebody and they were able to work in a very established professor's lab. But you might not hear back from everyone, and that's okay. So professors are busy, they might miss your email, or they might not have space for a student. You can email again, you can follow up, you can try different research labs. I've been ghosted by so many professors. I'm still being ghosted by at least 2 professors right now. So it's just, don't take it personally and keep trying. But I know for certain that, good professors love mentoring young scientists. So but by finding them and emailing them and citing a specific example of their research, you've demonstrated that you have what it takes to be a good researcher. So they will look very favorably upon this. So yeah, just cold email as many people as you can. Next slide, please. So once you get to try out research, and you might do this in your undergraduate career, so you might think that, okay, I might want to consider doing this more and full-time, maybe in a graduate school setting. So there are several options for you post-grad if you want to do this. You can either get a master's degree or a PhD degree. And what is the difference? So a master's is generally a shorter time commitment, and there are 2 types of masters. So there's either a course-based master's or a research-based master's. So if you simply just want to learn more about a field, if you feel like your undergrad knowledge was not enough to take you to a job, you can consider a course-based master's. So common course-based masters are kind of like biotechs are very common in Toronto, or maybe like pharmacy school. It's kind of like a genre of that. So here you just take full-time classes, and at the end you get an internship opportunity, which is obviously your foot in the door to get into any biotech company. But if you really are interested in research, you can try to enroll in a research-based master's program, which are pretty common in Canada. And those are generally just 2 to 3 years long, and you can be in the lab full-time and write a thesis and publish papers. And in Canada, you have this option of reclassifying into a PhD program. So a PhD is generally more involved, and it's a longer time commitment, so maybe 5-ish years. And here you will really get to lead your own project and investigate your own novel ideas in depth and get to work on many, many other projects as well. And you get the benefit of calling yourself a doctor at the end, but definitely not the kind of doctor that people would want on an airplane. So how do you get into these programs? So it generally depends on what program, but there are very basic course requirements, which you will not have to worry about if you're in a science-based undergraduate degree. So definitely, I would say to pick your program not based on the name, but based on the professors that are in the program that you want to work with. And then generally, you will also have to write a statement of purpose when you're applying that states your interest in maybe that professor or just that field in general. Next slide. So beyond what's actually explicitly stated on the course website, there's often a hidden curriculum that is passed on through word of mouth, which I'm here to tell you now. So essentially, it's very favorable to have a lot of undergraduate research experience and a lot of student leadership experience as well. So you would either want to do a summer research experience, either through summer research programs, which this can be really fun, and you can go abroad. So for example, I did a summer research program that was offered by the University of Toronto, and I got to spend my summer in Hong Kong working in like a Hong Kong university lab. So that was really awesome. Or you can just get this through cold emailing professors, but you want to do this maybe 2 to 3 months early. So start thinking early. Or some universities like UofT offer full year research courses. So at UofT, if you're in a specialist program, you can elect to choose a full year research course. Or you can choose to do an undergraduate thesis project. So for the 4th year of your undergrad, you can either work part-time at a lab to conduct a project, or give more time commitment should you choose to do that. And at the end of it, you will write a dissertation paper. And this can all be done in conjunction with part-time paid positions, so working in labs. And these are often pretty menial tasks, but it's okay money. And you get to interact with grad students and PIs to see what it really means to do research on this topic without like committing so much time and doing a full project in that lab. So this was really helpful for me because I got to work in a lot of like different labs with different model organisms. I got to see what working with worms was like. I got to see what working with like fish and like flies were like. And you might not like working with these model organisms. So that's a thing that you also want to like think about. But the number one thing that you want to gain, whether you do a summer research program or a full year research program, is independence. So being a researcher is really all about independent thought and independent ideas. So you want to strive really hard to gain independence early. So you want to ask lots of questions, bounce ideas you have with your supervisor. And if there's an idea that you have that they also think is a good idea, you can work on your own project with support from other students. And if you're working under a student, you can ask for a small piece that you can work on purely by yourself. So the purpose of all of this is to really learn how to think independently. So you want to learn the techniques in lab, but more importantly, you want to learn how to think like research scientists, to ask good questions. And this is very difficult and it takes a while to do. And I have not even mastered this yet. Yeah, and the last thing is you guys are all very involved now, but don't stop and keep getting involved. It's a really great way to make friends, as you will find out, and having like-minded peers is a really great resource. So you can share things with each other and keep each other on track. And the last thing is you want to find research mentors. So this is huge, and I wouldn't be anywhere if I didn't ask for advice from people every single step of the way. So it's possible to learn these things by yourself, but very hard. So there are many of these hidden curriculum items that it's just easier to ask for advice from somebody who's already been through it. So examples of research mentors could be graduate students, upper year students, or even professors that you connect with well in classes. You can ask them about life, you can ask them about research, you can ask them about anything. Professors love talking about their own research, so that's always a good thing to ask them. And you have my email, which we will also send out, so feel free to reach out to me if you're ever thinking about participating in research, and I'd be happy to answer. Next slide, please. So one of the more important considerations about whether or not you want to do a PhD is definitely the question of what can I even do with this piece of paper? What can I do with this degree? So why do a PhD? So you might actually want to do a PhD because you want to be a research scientist full-time as a job. So you can be a professor and run your own lab at a university, at a hospital, or even at a biotech company, or you can start your own biotech company. So as a research scientist with a PhD, you will have a better starting salary and a better entry-level position, even if you want to leave academia. So if you want to leave academia, for example, there are certain jobs that actually require an advanced degree to do. So for example, if you want to be a consultant, life science consulting, for example, you need to have domain expertise to actually know what people are saying and what the right move for a company is. Or if you want to do like finance, for example, you can be in healthcare and finance. So pharmaceutical company is a $1.48 trillion industry in 2022. And we're all relatively equal in health and disease. If you're rich, if you're poor, you all get the same diseases. Well, there are some health disparities, but we'll save that for another conversation. But besides the obvious career options, this is a time truly for yourself. So you get this time, you get paid, you get to explore an area you're interested in, you get to contribute to a field, you get to figure out who you are and meet a ton of people in an academic capacity. And you learn skills that will help you out in any field because you learn how to ask the right questions and you learn a lot of logic and what the right approach is to solving a problem. And I guess one of the main skills is you also learn how to fail and how to have tenacity to pick yourself back up. Yeah. So that's all transferable skills they can take to any sector. But as an example, this is just a few things of what people have gone on to do with these advanced degrees. So at the University of Toronto, which is kind of like the picture on the left, graduates of the program that I did my master's in have gone on to either become professors and run labs at basically all the name brand universities in the state, Europe, and even in Canada and everywhere, or to work in the private sector and become domain experts on advising in healthcare and related fields, or even completely unrelated fields like patent law. Or some people have really taken ownership of their ideas and developed companies and have become successful entrepreneurs. And the statistics are pretty similar for Harvard graduates as well. So about half choose to stay in academia and half of them choose to pursue careers in industry. So with that, I think we can talk about some other options, and I'll hand it back to Alice.
So I guess number one is, if you kind of like research and clinical science, like working with patients, MD PhD is actually an option as well. These programs, I was for UBC, you kind of have to interview independently, and both the MD and the PhD programs have to want you to get into that program. It is a little bit more limited space-wise, kind of fluctuates every year, but usually less than 10 people are going to those programs. And then you do 2 years of your MD, and then you do your PhD and thinking around another 2 or 3 years, and then you finish up another 2 years of your MD. And then you kind of go back with everyone else and do residency. So other biomed, kind of allied health professionals, you can definitely pursue nursing, dentistry, physiotherapy. There's occupational therapy as well, which kind of help people to work on. Actually, I'm not going to speak on that. And then speech language pathology, you can become a respiratory therapist, anesthesiology assistant, and a veterinary are all options as well. So, and then I guess since we're in a girls in STEM event, I'm assuming the majority of people here identify as women, identify as female presenting individuals. There are certain things that we have to think about that maybe other populations may not have to think about. In medicine, that specifically, there are certain gender-based stereotypes, and just in terms of specialties. And then this is kind of ingrained in, medical culture, and just having so many older people in medical cultures and these ideas that persist. So, for example, certain fields, especially in surgery, especially orthopedic surgery, urology, still have the idea of what they would want as a resident or what they would want as a medical doctor, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily look like us. But these past couple of years, programs have been trying to diversify and select more non-traditional applicants. Non-traditional applicants, I guess. But when you get into the field, it might feel like, as a female identifying person, you feel more inclined to pick certain specialties like family medicine, pediatrics, specialties that you see more people like yourself in. But that doesn't mean that everyone does not have the same equal skill sets and same abilities to do every specialty. And then there's also an implicit bias when you're actually working. Women or presented people are more likely to be seen as allied health professionals on the work. For example, people might misidentify you as nurses, or I can call nurse like over 20 times. I think even when you're talking with the patient, you're letting them know who you are and what you work for. And anecdotally, I've like seen my own preceptor, who's a short woman, person of color. She spent like a lot of time talking with the patient. After she left, the patient was like, "Okay, now where's the doctor?" And I was like, "Oh, the doctor just talked to you." But it's just those implicit biases, even amongst your coworkers and all patients that something to think about. And then lastly, I guess I put take out implications, because female physicians earn about 8 to 10% less, even accounting for the number of hours work, age, etc. And just some reasons to think maybe suspect is because right now we're in a fee-for-service model, which means the more patients you see, the more money you get. The more procedures you do, the more money you get. Women may spend more time with patients. They do more, mental health counseling, more kind of more emotional burden, and that can cut into the pay, even though you're working the same number of hours. And also, even there's a study that said, the same, the fee code, the amount of money you're paid for surgeries done on female genitalia is less than the ones that are done for same equivalent male genitalia. So just intrinsically in our medical system, how we get paid, there is systemic discrimination. Slide.
Yeah, so in academia, unfortunately, a lot of the struggles that Alice has just mentioned is also echoed. So women often face challenges of being overlooked, where your opinions and ideas will not be valued as much as some of your male colleagues. But just in terms of, I guess, gender representation in the trainees, we have reached relative gender parity, which just means that the number of male and female undergraduates or graduates, as you can see kind of on the left-hand plot, are relatively similar in terms of like enrollment. But on the right, we can see that as we progress through the ranks of academia, the higher the position, the proportion of women tend to dwindle. So in general, there are still very real barriers for women, especially in terms of starting a family. So if you're not in the lab for maternity leave, for example, your project will still be expected to be carried on and will likely be given to another person just to keep the progress going. And for women professors, not only do they have a harder time just getting appointed at a university, they also tend to accrue less funding and get paid less than their male counterparts, despite having the same amount of research output and also merit. So as Alice mentioned, you guys are really the next generation. So what can you do to kind of help the situation? So the first thing you want to do is just become aware that there are these, I guess, gender-based discriminatory issues, and to act effectively regarding that. So you want to proactively work to not internalize the current demographics when you're self-assessing. So overwhelmingly represented groups, such as, I guess, the old white men stereotype, are not naturally better suited for a position. And you have to really become an advocate for yourself. So speak up for your needs and speak up for others. There's only progress because of the next generation of scientists, and you guys are all great candidates for change. And with that, Alice and I will be happy to answer any questions.
So we have 2 questions prepared, and then we're going to look at the floor if anyone has some questions. So the first question being, what is one piece of advice you would give to your past self going through this process, at school or academia?
Linsey, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I can go first. So I guess we talked about a lot of good pieces of advice here, both if you wanted to pursue med school or academia. But I think it's also important to really not pigeonhole yourself into a career just because you think you should be doing this. So I know that med and like law and engineering are kind of like conventional routes, but you also really want to like think about what your passionate about, just because doing a PhD, 6 years is not a trivial amount of time. You want to really make sure that, you know, you're in a field that you're well suited for. So to do that, I guess, again, I want to emphasize the importance of just getting into as many research labs as you can at the undergraduate level.
I guess for me, what I wish I could learn is what actually working as a physician entails, because I don't think I really realize that, even like I'm still realizing that every single day. It's a lot of responsibility, and the novelty of being a medical student, of being a physician, wears off pretty fast. And you're kind of left with the sense, at least in the first year, well, this is going to be my entire life, this is going to be my career. And at the time, I had a lot of doubts, like I didn't know if, you know, I could go through with all the training, like, so I guess knowing that beforehand, I wish I had known that it was going to be like a lifelong time of learning. Like you'll never stop learning. There's so much things to learn, and so much new knowledge. So I guess in some sense, like I thought, oh, once I get in, I don't have to study more, or I don't have to, you know, constantly study for exams, get good grades, which is true in a sense. Like you don't really have to get good grades anymore. It's past level as long as you know the material, you're good. But even being able to pass, it was like a whole new world of things I had to know about. And then just being on the work now, having to communicate with people every day, just making sure that, you know, you do enjoy talking to people and do enjoy communicating, because you'll have to be presenting things every single day. Like, and then again, like in terms of research as well, there'll always be research that people want for you to do. There's always different things that people want you to take on. So I guess I wish I knew what it would really like to be a doctor. Which you guys are coming in here and you guys are learning, so this is great.
For the second question we have, what's the future for you after you finish your degree?
Maybe I can go first. So this is in the pretty distant future for me. So I've definitely considered a lot of things. I've considered trying to pivot into like consulting, or maybe just like staying in industry as like a scientist. So I think that's probably more I guess probable for me. So Boston is a really great place because there are a lot of startups. Um, yeah, but I think I'm still trying to figure it out, and I genuinely don't have that great of an idea. So I think it's also okay to not know what you want to do with your entire life, like right there and then. Like certainly in undergrad, I didn't even know I wanted to do a PhD. So yeah, I think just figuring it out as life goes.
For me, I'll be doing my 2 years of family medicine training, hopefully here at UBC. And then afterwards, I plan on locuming for at least a year or two. Locuming is just when you're kind of like a substitute doctor. You go to different clinics for 2 weeks or a month or 2 months at a time. You try out different things. You don't really have that responsibility of like, you know, these are my patients, I need to see them, or you know, I need to work here 9 to 5. You just kind of take your locum sessions and then do a bit of traveling. And that's a real reason why I chose family med, is flexibility and the ability to kind of like take off and do something else if I get bored, and not be really tied down to a hospital or to a clinic that much.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? Going back to the research component, when is the best time to hold legal talks and ask for somewhere volunteering?
I'm so sorry. Could that question be repeated?
Was the question just like asking like when to email across for like the different research opportunities? 6 months before, 8 months before.
Okay, so when's the best time to email prof? So are you currently in undergrad or are you
First year.
first year undergrad? Okay, so I think 2-3 months before the end of, I guess, like the spring semester will probably be a good time because a lot of professors tend to take undergraduate students during the summer. So if you're in your fourth year or going into your fourth year, I would recommend starting to contact thesis advisors for your fourth year undergrad thesis. Again, like 2-3 months before September.
Do you have any other questions? Is there any questions in the chat? Oh, okay, no. I guess we can move to the next slide. Okay, yeah, so if everyone wants to keep up to date with us, we do a bunch of fun events. It's our Instagram, so for the board, and then our UBC presentations. And you also get a round of applause for our amazing presenters today. Yeah, we have pizza at the back, and feel free to stick around and network and socialize.